Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm James Leichter. This is Field Service Live. We're here every week. Sometimes we have guests. Sometimes we have just me. Tonight you have just me, and that's good because I've got some great book recommendations for you. If you're like me, then you probably have spent a lot of time reading books. Some books you wish you hadn't read. Others were a lot better. We spend a lot of time reading books, but it's hard to know what books really matter, which ones really make a difference. And tonight, I hope to share with you some books that I think will make a big difference. Now, what might be unique is I'm going to talk to you about books, all of which I've read, by the way, from cover to cover. I'm going to talk to you about which books for what departments. If you're a salesperson, marketing person, if you are a manager, if you are an owner, I'll talk to you about the books that I would recommend, and I'll show you those. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Before I do, let me ask you to please like and subscribe the channel. The reason why is because the more likes and the more people who subscribe to the channel, the more important YouTube thinks we are. And I think serving the field service industry, all these field service companies out there are very important to our economy. And I think anything that we can do to help with those companies, help those companies be more successful is important. And it would help me and help the channel if you would subscribe and like and hit that little bell. Okay, let's get into it. First, books. If you are an owner or a manager, general manager, or an owner of a company, these are the books for you. Now, I bet you've heard of the first one. The first one is the E-Myth. Now, I have here the original. I think it's the original E-Myth because this is the one. You can see it. I don't know if it shows up on the camera. Colin, how does that show up? Can you see that that's yellow on camera? All right, I'm talking to Colin, my engineer back there behind the camera. I wanted to know if the yellow came through. I've had it that long. This book, the E-Myth, is all about getting control of your company, working in your company versus working on your company. So some of us really just own our job, and we're so busy, we might as well be working for somebody else. This is all about making the transition from working in it to working on it. It's a classic. Many of you are probably saying to yourself, oh yeah, already read that one. Now, it has been revised. In fact, there is a contractor version. If you haven't bought this book before, then I would buy the contractor version. However, if you already own this version, the original, call it generic version, I wouldn't buy the contractor version. There's really not much of a difference. I've read both, and there really wasn't much of a difference at all. Easy way, I think, for the author Gerber to make some extra money. He just opened this thing up on his computer and started putting the word contractor in there, and voila, he had a new book. Maybe he's watching Colin going, that's not what I did. And then the person sitting next to him said, yeah, that's what you did, Michael. All right. So the E-Myth. Another book, again, for owners. These are all owners, managers. Another book that I would highly recommend is High Output Management by Andy Grove. Andy Grove is the former CEO of Intel. I know they don't make furnaces. They make chips, though, that might go into furnaces. But he is a fantastic teacher and author. He's a university professor. This guy joined Intel when they had 3 employees, and he was hired to manage the company. Now, actually, he's a mechanical engineer, he's an electrical engineer by training, and he was hired not to be an engineer, but he was hired to be a manager of the company because the founders didn't want to deal with people. When he left, they had over 100,000 employees, so this man knows a lot about hiring, promoting, paying, firing, dealing with people, and it shows in his book. It's really a great book. What are you going to learn from this book? Well, it talks a lot about coming up with key performance ratios first, knowing what numbers drive your company, like What are the most important numbers that you need to pay attention to drive your business manager people? Then my favorite part of the book is he talks a lot about how to have meetings, company meetings, one-on-one meetings, problem-solving meetings. Different types of meetings have different types of discipline, and he goes through those. Now, I don't know about you, but I understand the importance of meetings. A lot of younger people or non-business people tend to think that meetings are a waste of time. I've heard people say meetings are where managers go to look like they're busy and actually doing something. But you know what? Last time I checked, not one NFL head coach scored a single touchdown. Not last year anyway. I don't think they kicked any field goals. I don't remember a single coach kicking field goals, tackling anybody, or scoring touchdowns. In fact, they just stand around on the sidelines watching the football game. I mean, what do they get paid for? Well, obviously, they've done a lot of work preparing for that game, right? And that work allows them to stand there and manage the game from the sideline. And they did it with a lot of meetings, training. And that's really what we managers should be doing. It doesn't matter what business we're in. You could own a restaurant, but of course we're dedicated to field service businesses. Your job as a manager is to train people first. That's it. And that's Grove's point. He said the job of a manager, first and foremost, is to be the company's trainer. So you train, you're always mentoring and teaching people things. And what better medium to train people than in a meeting, to have a meeting where you can train multiple people at one time. That's his point, among others. Great book, and it's not a tough read, as you can see. Another book, Traction. Traction is all about, well, getting traction. The point of the title is, do you have traction? Is your company spinning its wheels in the mud? Are you moving forward? Do you have traction? That's the idea behind the title. But the purpose of Traction is to learn how to grow your business. It does talk a lot about how to have meetings, but this book only covers only covers company meetings, meetings for the whole company planning meetings. Andy Grove talks about company meetings, but he focuses on small group meetings and one-on-one meetings, where this book talks a lot about having meetings for the entire company, problem-solving meetings. Both books I highly recommend. If you haven't read either, you might want to read this one first because it's a whole lot easier to read and there's less to do. This book has a lot of checklists, a lot of forms that need to be filled out and so forth. It is not really a book that you read and then you just call it good. It takes 1, 2, 3 years to implement this book. So this really is a book about turning your business around or getting traction, and there's a lot of things you have to do to get through this book. Again, high output management is more like read it and put it into practice, come back and check it out once in a while. This is a book full of homework. I have had numerous clients, as well as our company, follow this book. I'll admit our company has struggled a bit to follow this book. There's a lot to do. It takes a lot of discipline by all the department heads. But this book has really turned several companies that I'm aware of around in a major way. So that's Traction. Gino Wickman, easy to find, very popular. There's another book that's really just like Traction. It came out before Traction as far as I can remember. This book is a little more complicated than even Traction is. So if you've already read Traction, maybe you weren't impressed. Or if you want another book that's similar to Traction but has some different approaches, then you might consider Scaling Up. This book, Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, is a lot like Traction but even more complicated. There are a lot more bits and pieces of specific information. I think it was maybe better written. I'm not going to say that the program is better, but I think it was better written. It just has a lot more detail. It's really a very pretty book. Is it okay to say pretty when you're a guy? Okay. Colin says it's okay. But it is. It's a pretty book. I mean, it's color-coded for the different sections and chapters. And it's a really nice-looking book. Maybe that's not important. You're thinking, who cares if it's nice looking? But it is. It's a nice looking book. Traction is more of just a black and white book. Now, I bring that up only because I found this book harder to implement, and it took more time to understand it, but it was easier to read because it was visually more appealing. So, if that matters. All right. That takes care of the books meant for owners who manage the company or high-level managers. If you're a department manager, these aren't necessarily for you, with the exception of the traction-type books. A department manager, I think, would benefit a lot from these. But owners, especially if you're a technician who owns your company, you're still in the field, you're still doing the work, these are the books for you, the E-Myth book, because it's all about getting yourself out of the field and into the office where you can be more of a head coach. Let's talk about a big problem: getting people, hiring people, interviewing people. This is the book for that. This book is called Who? The title basically comes from the idea of who are you going to hire? Get some water there. Sorry, I've been speaking all week, and I'm losing my voice. But only wimps would call in sick, right? So here I am. If I can't speak, we'll just have Colin come up here and tell us what he thinks of all these books. He just snuck out the room. Come back here, Colin. All right, so Who? This book is how to find people, how to interview people, questions to ask. And when I say it's about how to find people, they don't have like the answer that no one's ever heard of, but they do talk about how to network and ask your friends and get out in the world and try to find people, how to do it. Because if you think about it, you're always recruiting. If you need to hire people, you should have special business cards that were designed to recruit people. So it's not just your average business card. It's a business card geared towards recruiting people. And then once you get them into your building, you've only got about an hour to interview them and figure out if they're right for your company. And you might call them in for a second interview. What are you going to ask them? What are the right questions? What are the right answers? What's the right body language you're looking for? This book addresses all of that. It is a good book, the best book I've seen on interviewing people. So check that out. The stack will get so high you won't be able to see me anymore. Now, if you are a department manager or a first-time manager, like you're an owner, first-time manager, you've never managed anything, and you would just like a book about daily management. I mean, like how to organize your desk, how to take notes, how to keep a calendar, when to talk to people, what to say to them, etc. If you're one of those people, then you would like, the magic hand. That was Colin's magic hand to give me more water. They feel sorry for me upstairs. Thank you, Susan. That was Susan coming in here with water, passing it on to Colin, and he's like, how do I get it to him without being on camera? All right, back to the book. The First-Time Manager, right there. And if you're listening to the podcast, that's the title, The First-Time Manager, and we can post these in the show notes. You'll have no trouble finding it. Just go to your favorite bookseller and type in The First-Time Manager. This is really a terrific book. I've read it twice. I actually read the book a long time ago, but I lost it, so I went to order another, and it had been revised like 3 times. So I bought the latest revision, the 7th edition, and I read it again, and just kind of reminded me of how what a bad job I've been doing of managing people. But it really does give you a lot of great information on how to manage your department, your company. Now, it isn't a substitute for books like High Output Management or Traction. I think High Output Management is a book you read when you're getting started. And I think if you have a company that's been around a while and you've been having trouble growing that company, then a book like Traction or Scaling Up is right for you. But if you're a department manager specifically, not necessarily a first-time manager, this is the book for you. It is a terrific book. And again, the reason why I like it is there's not a lot of platitudes, like non-specific information that just sounds like a cheerleader delivered it. It gives you very specific information, to-dos, and facts. Good book. All right. Now, we're going to talk about sales. So all of you that are into sales, I've got book recommendations for you. You don't have to waste your time reading a bunch of other books. These are the ones to start with. Number 1, this is Little Red Book of Selling. It's a classic, and you'll have no trouble finding it. Jeffrey Gitomer, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Gitomer. But anyway, Little Red Book of Selling, you search for that, you'll find it. This is a neat book. And like the other book, this is a really well-written book. The pages are written so nicely. I feel like a kindergarten teacher reading the book to the kids right here. But I did want to show you the pages because they really look nice, and I like that. Makes it easier to read. But also keep in mind, it's not just us reading these books. You'll want to recommend these books to your coworkers, and if they're more readable, then you got a better chance that they'll read them. But you know what? If you were to read only one sales book, just one, this ought to be it. It's an easy read. It's fun. It's funny at times. The author is terrific. There have been many revisions, a lot of fine-tuning of this book, and I think you'll really like it. This is my favorite sales book. And by the way, it's a recent book for me. When we hired somebody to manage our sales and marketing department, I asked that person, what books have you read? And this came up, and I wrote it down, and I went and bought the book, and I loved it. So I would recommend it. Now, if you are in sales, this is a sales book, of course. If you are in sales, but you do a lot of speaking and presenting, and you give sales pitches and product demonstrations and things like that, in-home sales presentations, then this is the book for you. This is called The 3-Minute Rule. And again, I'm not telling you who the authors are because you'll have no trouble finding the book. Just type in The 3-Minute Rule. You'll see the little stopwatch up there in the corner, and you'll know you found the book. This book is all about how to be succinct, how to be more articulate, how to get your message across in no more than 3 minutes, hence the 3-Minute Rule title. I really like it because I think that I'm a pretty good presenter, but I also think I talk too much, and you're not supposed to agree with that, all of you. I think I sometimes belabor the point. I know that especially early on, I used to have something sold, and I would just keep talking. Sometimes talk them right out of the sale. I had it sold and talked them right out of buying. Then they'd say, well, I'm going to think about it. If I had just shut up, I probably would have kept the sale. There are times where less is more, and, that's a cute saying, but it's not always right. But there are times where less is a lot more, and this book teaches you how to organize your thoughts, how to narrow down the most important points you want to make, and create a presentation that's as short and succinct and as informative and motivating as possible. It is another well-written book. It is black and white. but there are a lot of illustrations and things that help you understand the book, so it's not just blobs of text. I think you'll like that. I think that'll be one of your favorite books, actually. All right, another sales book. This one maybe you haven't heard of. This is an absolute read. You should read this book for sure. If you are new to sales and you wanted to know what book do I read first, I would probably read The Little Red Book of Selling, and then I would consider reading this book next, the one I'm about to show you. Then I would read The 3-Minute Rule. This book, Never Split the Difference. Awesome book. My son recommended this a long time ago. He's not in sales. I didn't take him seriously because the title didn't really indicate that it would have anything that would help me a lot. So I didn't consider it a priority. And finally, I got around to reading the book during all the COVID stuff. And wow, it was fantastic. This book, absolutely, first 2 or 3 pages, you already have things that are going to help you negotiate and sell. Now, this book isn't really a sales book specifically. It is a book about how to negotiate with people, how to read them, figure out what they really want, and work out the details. The author, Chris Voss, he's all over YouTube. If you want to check him out, there's a lot of neat videos you can watch. You can watch those before you read the book to see if you're interested in the guy. He is a former Kansas City, Missouri police officer. That's where I'm from, the Kansas City, Missouri area. And then he went to work as an FBI negotiator, ended up as an FBI terrorist negotiator. And that wasn't just his title. I mean, he really did a lot of negotiating with bad people. And he put a lot of those lessons learned in this book, and they really do apply to sales. So I think that this would be good for those of you who have read some sales books. You feel like you're a pretty good salesperson. Maybe you struggle a little bit with overcoming price objections, negotiating. This book's for you. Another thing, even if you're not into sales, if you do any kind of negotiating for a living, or you deal with prices, maybe you're a buyer. If you buy things from vendors and there's oftentimes price negotiations going on, this book should help you a lot. And I mean a lot. That thing, every page has something where you go, oh, wow, that's a good idea. Finally, marketing. I've read a lot of marketing books, and I have been totally unimpressed. I bought a lot of marketing books. I've thumbed through some and never even read them because they just looked terrible. But many of them were just, I don't know, they weren't worth recommending. Anyway, I have one for you. And I don't have any others. I just have really one marketing book. I know there's other marketing books out there that some of you may know of that are fantastic, but I think that most everything that you've read is going to be covered in this book. And don't let the title scare you away. Marketing for Dummies. Now, I don't own a lot of dummy books. In fact, I think this is it. This is the only dummies book I've ever bought. No, I take that back. I bought a programming for dummies type of book once, and it just proved to me I was a dummy. But don't let the dummies title fool you. This is a terrific book, and it covers marketing from A to Z as if you were taking a marketing class at a college or a junior college. There's a lot to marketing, creating marketing plans and all kinds of paperwork and analysis and research, and this covers all of it. Now, this is not an advertising book. There are books out there for advertising. This is not necessarily how to write copy or how to write an ad for Facebook, but it does talk a lot about writing ads and tracking them and analyzing them and realizing what gets people motivated to buy or to collect additional information about your company and your product. It'll take a while to read. At least it did for me. There's a lot of text in here, and it also requires a bit of thinking. I mean, it's the kind of book that you read and you stop and just think about it for a while, and then you maybe backtrack to another page, and you come back and start reading again, and you're backtracking. So it's a bit of work to read it, but you'll also find yourself very motivated to start changing how you do things in your company, because it's going to point out a lot of marketing mistakes that all of us make. So I think you'll like that book. Now, finally, I got one remaining book. Got to hide it. I got one remaining book for those of you who have seen it all, read it all. You're not impressed so far. None of this is that great. You've heard of it all, and you don't think it'll help you. This one, I think, is for you. So this is for the real aggressive learner who likes to take on books and eat those books up. It is called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. This is written by a PhD. He really goes into the science of persuading people. What causes people to believe what they believe? Why do people believe things on the internet and they don't believe things from a so-called expert? Or what makes them think they're an expert? What makes people believable? Why do they believe it? He really gets into the details of believability and persuasion and authority and just everything centered around that. It is very detailed, I will say. Unlike the Little Red Book of Selling, it is a lot of text, and there's graphics, and there's charts. And I mean, this guy he's a PhD, as I mentioned, and it really shows. You're going to feel like this is like the toughest professor you've ever had, because it is a bit to read. Now, I have to admit, I actually skipped through part of this book and never came back to it because it was complicated, and I wanted to get through the book because I really found it very helpful. But when I got to some parts, I thought, ooh, I can skip this and come back to it. And I need to come back to it. I got about 50 more pages to read. But this thing took a long time. It's about 500 pages. What I got out of it, though, is a really deep understanding of what constitutes authority, the perception of authority, and why people believe one thing and don't believe something else, and how you can use that information to help you become more influential and more believable. Now, I want to get into some kind of like self-help books. These are books specifically for people that have a certain issue. I didn't want to say problem, a certain problem, but that's kind of what it is. If you have a certain problem, I've got the book for you. Now, let's say that you have a hard time getting things done. You're not a GSD, get stuff done kind of person. If you procrastinate a lot, if you wonder how certain people get a lot of things done, or how certain people get rich and you can't get rich, or how people build big businesses and you can't, then the book I would recommend reading is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm sure you've heard of it because it is so popular. Stephen Covey is not a business person. He doesn't claim to be. He's a researcher. That's what he says he is. That's all he claims to be. He does research. But he is a terrific researcher. He looks at people, companies, and analyzes them when he writes his books. This book is all about the habits and techniques that successful people use to get things done. They live by a certain set of rules and framework, and they get things done when other people don't. He came up with a list of things that those people just seem to do on a regular basis, and maybe some of us don't. So if you personally struggle with getting things done in your personal life, or you as a business owner, manager, or any employee really, if you struggle getting things done, finishing things you've started, I really think that this book will help a lot. Don't you think that'd be applicable to everybody? Yes, yeah. Colin asked me if I thought it was applicable to everybody. I think it really is. I think all of us really struggle with that. I know I used to struggle with it a lot more than I do, and I created some habits that I follow very strictly that help me, but I've got lots of work to do. There's a lot of room for improvement in my life too. I was going to say one thing about this book, like some of these, this is not just a read it and forget it or read it quick and you're fixed. It really has you doing a lot of things differently. So it's kind of a self-help book, you know. I mean, it's asking you to change your habits and do things differently. So you'll be picking this book up and you will be highlighting it and earmarking it and putting in little pieces of paper. You'll be referring to it on a regular basis. Another book for those of you struggling to get things done. It is a lot like this one. You could read this one, or you could read the one I'm about to show you. 4 Disciplines of Execution. So it's kind of like, do you want to know 7 or do you want to know just 4? Similar books, but both were really, really good. The reason why I decided to recommend both, and they're kind of competing with one another, is I just happened to read one and heard about the other, read it, and I thought both of them were worth reading. I mean, I didn't say to myself, gee, I wish I had only read one book. I wasted my time with the other. I like this book because it just hits you a different way. If this book, like if you read this book and it didn't do it for you and you're still struggling, then maybe try this book and it'll give you a different message. Also, even if you don't think that you would benefit from books like this, there's people around you that might. You might have kids, you might have family, coworkers, employees, and you can be their mentor. You can be their teacher. You can give them some of the lessons that you've learned from these books. I think the books will help you become a better mentor. Now, my last book that I wanted to recommend. This book was mentioned by last week's guest. He said that it was one of the most influential books that he had ever read. I had not read it. Actually, I owned it and forgot about it. I went to order the book, realized I already had it, realized I had read part of it, and I went ahead and finished it. Now, the reason why I never finished it is because some of the book didn't apply to me. And back then, I was in a hurry and impatient and thought, well, I'm going to move on to some other stuff. And I didn't finish it. But I did finish it since our show last week. This book would be great for anyone that you know of. Again, these could be family members, your spouse, your employees, anyone who struggles with the rich man, poor man mentality thing, like someone that's not doing well thinks that rich people only got rich because they lie a lot and they cheat people, and the only reason why I'm poor is because the world is against me and the system is rigged and everything's unfair. If you know anyone that struggles with those poor person habits, this would be a great book. I'm sure you've seen it. You've heard of it. It's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It is all about the differences in how quote-unquote rich people think. And when I say rich, I don't necessarily mean billionaires. I just mean the guy down the road that has a great house, great car, and money in the bank, and the people down the road that don't. The people that struggle with building wealth, and the people that just always live paycheck to paycheck. This gives them hopefully a different way of thinking. There's certain habits, unless you inherited your money or got really lucky, and who is really that lucky? There are certain habits that high-income earners, people with a high net worth have that other people don't. And I certainly know both kinds of people, and I have seen it without a doubt. I've seen the differences in how people think and how they process information, a difference in how the rich person makes conclusions and how the poor person makes conclusions, the way they reason, and I could go on and on. This book does a better job of explaining it than me. So this is the book for the person who has what I'll call the poor people mentality, the poor person mentality. And more importantly, it's not that they think I could be a high net worth individual if I get my college degree. This is for the person that says, I could never be a high net worth person until I start screwing over people, lying, cheating, or being dishonest, because that's really about the only way that you can become rich. If you've heard that from somebody, hand them a copy of this book, because I think that if they read it with an open mind, I think that they'll find it very believable and very moving. So that is it. That is my list of recommended books. Remember, you don't have to read every one of them because some of them compete with each other. But if you read one and you're not super impressed, like you read Traction and you didn't like it or you didn't think it could help you, well, then you know that you should read Scaling Up, and maybe that will do it. If you know anyone that would like to be a guest on our show, like if you know an industry expert, an author, a manufacturer, anything like that, anybody that you think would be interesting and helpful to the field service industry, we would love to hear about them. You can contact us, and we will reach out to them. Do we have any questions, Colin, that need to be addressed?
No, but we did link all the books that you went through. They're all over there on the comments.
Very good. So Colin wanted me to make sure I reminded all of you, especially if you're just listening to this on a podcast. On YouTube, we've linked all the books in the comment section. Hopefully you can find those books. Now, those aren't affiliate links, by the way. You're not clicking on there and making us money. We just put the links on there to make it easier on you. I would really like to know what you guys think, you guys and gals, think of these books. If you've read them, please put some comments down there. If you read them later, come back to this video, come back to the channel, and tell us what you think. And if you have other book recommendations, I would love them because I like buying books. I'm a computer nerd, but I still like paper and pencil. I still like books, and I'd love to hear your recommendations. Thank you very much for being here. I'm James Leichter, Field Service Live. I hope to see you next week. Good night.